If the dead could talk, what's the first thing you think they'd say? Because I can tell you this much. When I pressed my ear to the soil that night, they didn't whisper my name. They screamed it. It started with a voicemail. Mr. Cross, if you're really what they say you are, if you're really looking for truth, then come to Raven Hollow. Come before the next full moon. You'll find all your missing people here. The voice was old, shaky, and recorded on what sounded like an ancient answer machine. I played it twice more, my stomach tightening each time. I didn't recognize the number, but something in that voice, the tremor, the desperation, made it impossible to ignore. I host a podcast called Beneath the Surface, where I investigate disappearances, murders, and the unexplained corners of small-town America. It's the kind of show where skeptics call me insane and believers send me tips. But this one felt different. The message ended with a set of coordinates. When I looked them up, it wasn't a house or a business. It was a graveyard. Raven Hollow Cemetery, population 0. According to local records, it had been abandoned since 1974, after a series of unsolved deaths drove the townspeople to seal it off. The church that owned the land burned down years ago, and no one rebuilt. But over the last decade, dozens of missing persons reports had come from that region, all vanishing near the same stretch of road. That's what pulled me there on a gray autumn morning, camera and recorder in hand, my producer Lauren begging me not to go alone. You're seriously driving 6 hours in the middle of nowhere because of one voicemail? She'd said. Not just one, I told her. 4. 3 more had arrived after first, each one shorter, each one recorded on the same static-laced machine. The last simply said, "He's waking up." By the time I reached Raven Hollow, the sun was setting behind the hills, bleeding orange light across the cracked highway. The town itself was barely a town anymore, just a handful of buildings leaning against time. A boarded-up diner, a gas station with one working pump, and a bar that smelled of cigarette ash and rain. I stopped there first. The bartender was a heavy-set man with thinning hair and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. His name tag read Walt. He didn't smile when I walked in. "You're not from around here," he said, drying a glass that didn't need drying. "No," I replied, taking a seat. "I'm doing a story. You ever hear of Raven Hollow Cemetery?" His hand froze mid-polish. "You don't want to go there." I already did. I lied. Nothing but overgrown weeds. He looked up sharply, his eyes dark. "Then you heard them." For a second, I thought he was joking, but there was no humor in his face. "Heard who?" I asked. "The ones that ain't done dying." I laughed uneasily. "Ghost stories." He leaned closer. "Listen, city boy. They say the ground they're never settled. That's why the graves keep shifting. You stand still long enough, and you'll hear 'em moving under your feet, clawing, whispering. Some folks say the soil breathes." He stopped, realizing he'd said too much. "Just stay away," he muttered, walking off. That was all the encouragement I needed to go. I arrived at the cemetery gate just before midnight. The iron fence was rusted, half collapsed in places, and covered in vines thick as rope. The gate itself was chained shut, but the lock was broken. I pushed it open, the metal groaning like something alive. Fog rolled across the ground, rising in thin sheets from the earth. The air smelled of wet moss and decay. My flashlight beam cut through the mist, landing on the nearest row of tombstones, each one crooked, some shattered entirely. I hit record. "This is Daniel Cross," I whispered into the mic. "Raven Hollow Cemetery. Entry 1. My voice sounded smaller than usual. The silence here wasn't natural. There were no crickets, no wind, no movement at all. It was like stepping into a vacuum. Even the sound of my boots against the dirt seemed muffled, as if the ground was swallowing the noise. Then I noticed something strange. The graves were uneven. Some mounds were sunk deeper than others, and several headstones bore names scratched out entirely, replaced by fresh carvings. The newest one was dated 2023. I knelt to examine it. The name read, Daniel Cross. The world tilted. I stumbled back, heart pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. I turned off the recorder, certain it was a prank, maybe local kids trying to scare outsiders. But when I brushed away the dirt around the grave's base, I found something half buried there, a small, old-fashioned recorder, just like the one I use for my podcast. When I pressed play, my own voice came through. This is Daniel Cross. Raven Hollow Cemetery. Entry 1. It was the same recording I'd made just moments ago, word for word, breath for breath, except for the ending. In the version I just played, my voice trembled as it said, "He's coming." And then, from the darkness behind me, something whispered, a voice so close it brushed the back of my neck. "Welcome home, Daniel." I spun around, but the graveyard was empty. My flashlight flickered. And then, for just a heartbeat, I saw him, a figure standing among the tombstones, tall and thin, wearing a black hat that cast his face in shadow. His head tilted slightly, as if studying me. Then the light died. For a moment there was nothing, just the darkness pressing against me, heavy and absolute, the kind of black that eats sound. My flashlight sputtered once more and died completely. I could hear the faint hiss of static from my recorder, still running, capturing my breath, my heartbeat, and something else. Something faint, like movement in the soil. I stood perfectly still, too afraid to even turn around, afraid that if I moved, whatever I'd seen would move too. The fog shifted slightly, curling around my legs. The cold air cut into my throat when I finally forced myself to whisper, "Hello." My voice didn't echo. It simply vanished into the air, swallowed whole. I strained to listen, to catch any sound that might explain what I'd seen, but the silence felt alive now, like it was waiting for me to speak again. Somewhere far off, maybe 50 feet ahead, came the soft crunch of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, not the rustle of an animal or the random shuffle of leaves. Human steps. I turned on my phone's flashlight, its pale glow spilling weakly into the mist. The beam reached only a few feet, but was enough to see a shape moving between the gravestones. A tall figure, coat brushing the tops of the weeds, a wide-brimmed hat casting his face in complete darkness. "Sir," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you the caretaker?" The figure stopped. He didn't answer. For a few seconds, we just stood there in that endless fog, watching each other, though I wasn't even sure he was watching me. I took a hesitant step forward, my hand shaking as I lifted the light higher. "Sir." This time he spoke, but the sound didn't come from where he stood. It came from everywhere, reverberating to the ground itself, like the earth was forming the words. "You shouldn't have come here, Daniel." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the gravel. The light rolled, spinning in slow circles until it landed facing him again. But now he was gone. Only fog. I crouched to pick up the phone, my breath coming fast. The moment I touched it, the screen flickered, and for a split second, the camera feed showed something that shouldn't have been there. My own face, staring back at me, but twisted, mouth open in a silent scream. Then it cut to black. I stumbled backward, clutching the recorder like a weapon, my voice trembling as I whispered into it. "This is still Daniel Cross, Raven Hollow Cemetery, approximately midnight. There's someone here. A man, tall, wearing black. He knows my name. A sound cut me off, not from the fog this time, but beneath my feet. A faint dragging noise, like fingernails scraping stone. I froze. The ground trembled faintly, and I swear I could feel something shifting below the soil, moving. The breath caught in my throat. The air stank of rot. Then, with a soft, wet sound, a hand broke through the dirt beside the nearest grave. I staggered back, tripping over a fallen cross. The hand was pale and thin, the skin shriveled, mud clinging to the fingernails. It twitched, grasping blindly at the air. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. Another hand broke through the surface beside it, followed by the faint sound of labored breathing, shallow, rasping, human. My instincts finally kicked in. I ran. The fog seemed to thicken the faster I moved, wrapping around me like a living thing. Gravestones appeared and vanished in my path, each one more crooked than the last. My feet pounded the ground, my heart slamming against my ribs. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I needed to get away. From the graves, from the whispers, from that impossible voice that had spoken my name. I didn't stop until I saw light again, a faint orange glow flickering ahead. I burst through a line of dead trees and found myself at the edge of an old caretaker's shack. Its wooden boards were warped with age, its roof half collapsed. The lantern hanging by the door swung slowly in the wind, its flame guttering. I stumbled inside, slamming the door behind me. The interior smelled of mold and kerosene. Dust coated everything, the shelves, the tools, the cracked glass of a framed photo on the wall. My phone battery was nearly dead, but its dim glow revealed a cluttered workbench covered in strange things. Old keys, bones, bits of fabric tied together with twine, and dozens of small jars filled with dark liquid. The photograph caught my attention. It showed a man standing in front of the same shack, holding a shovel. His face was mostly hidden by the brim of his hat, but his build, his stance, it was a man from a graveyard. The caption below the photo was handwritten. Samuel Ward, Keeper the Hollow, 1894. My stomach twisted. The picture was more than a century old. A creak behind me made me spin around. The door I'd closed was open again, swinging gently on its hinges. Cold air poured in, carrying the faint smell of earth. I swallowed hard, every instinct screaming to run again, but something drew my eyes downward. Footprints, fresh, wet, leading into the shack. But they didn't stop at the door. They continued across the floor, right up to where I stood. Daniel. The voice was directly behind me. I turned slowly, dread coiling like ice in my veins. The man in the black hat stood in the doorway, his lantern no longer lit, but somehow I could see him clearly. His skin was pale and tight against his skull, his lips cracked and dry. He didn't blink. He didn't need to. What do you want? I whispered. He tilted his head slightly, that same slow, unnatural movement. I want what's mine. I shook my head, backing away until I hit the workbench. I don't know what that means. You took it, he said. Long ago. My pulse roared in my ears. You've got the wrong person. I just got here. He smiled faintly. It wasn't warm. It wasn't human. No one just gets here. The hollow only calls its own. He stepped closer, and as he did, I could see the earth flaking off his coat, small bits of dirt falling from his sleeves like dust. His eyes were dark, bottomless. You hear them now, don't you? He asked. They're restless. You woke them. Who? I demanded. Who did I wake? He reached out, and his cold fingers brushed my shoulder. The ones you left behind. Something shifted in my mind at those words. A flash, quick and sharp. A memory I didn't recognize. A funeral. My hands on a coffin. The sound of earth hitting wood. My voice whispering, I'm sorry. Then darkness. I blinked, gasping, and the man was gone. The shack was silent again, the only sound my ragged breathing. I looked around wildly, searching for him, but he'd vanished like smoke. Then I saw it. The floorboards near the back of the room were loose. Something glowed faintly beneath them. I knelt and pried one up. Beneath the boards lay a small box wrapped in rotted cloth. The faint light was coming from inside it, pulsing softly. I hesitated, then unwrapped it. Inside was an old brass key, cold to the touch, and a folded piece of paper covered in faded ink. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was shaky, but the words were clear. To bury him is to bind him. To dig again is to wake him. Never open the last grave. The moment I finished reading, the ground beneath the shack began to tremble. The shelves rattled. The jars on the bench shattered, spilling their contents across the floor. From somewhere deep below, I heard the unmistakable sound of something heavy moving. Something enormous. The walls groaned as the lantern by the door flared to life on its own, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. And in the center of the floor, where the key had been, the soil began to crack open, revealing a hole. From the darkness below came a low, inhuman moan, and then a whisper, echoing through the room in a dozen voices at once. Voices of the dead, of the buried, of the forgotten. You open the grave. The sound that rose from beneath the shack was not like anything I'd ever heard. Not a voice, not a growl, not even a human scream. It was ancient, wet, and heavy, like the earth itself was exhaling after holding its breath for centuries. The floorboards rattled under my knees. I stumbled backward, clutching the brass key so tightly it cut into my palm. The glow from the crack in the floor grew brighter, not warm like firelight, but pale and sickly, the color of bones left too long in the ground. The air stank of soil and something older, the sour smell of things that had died and kept dying. The noise rose in pitch, trembling the walls. I scrambled to my feet, but before I could move toward the door, it slammed shut on its own, the sound so violent it shook dust from the ceiling. I turned in circles, heart pounding, and saw the light spreading along the floorboards like water, tracing veins across the wood until they reached the walls. It pulsed once, twice, then stopped. Everything went silent again. I stood there in the quiet, afraid to breathe. Then I heard it, a faint knock. Once, twice, 3 times. It was coming from beneath the floor. I dropped to my knees again, flashlight trembling in my hand, the beam shaking across the boards. The glow was fading now, leaving behind only darkness. But the knocking continued, slow, deliberate, each strike sending a dull vibration through the wood. I pressed my ear close and listened. At first, I thought it was random, but there was rhythm in it, a pattern almost like words. My breath fogged against the floor. "What do you want?" I whispered. The knocking stopped. Then, after a pause, 3 soft taps, perfectly spaced. A pause. Then again, 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. It wasn't random. It was a signal. I sat back, trying to steady myself, trying to think. I was a man of logic, of research, of documentation. I didn't believe in ghosts or curses or any of that nonsense. And yet here I was, alone in a shack that breathed above something that wanted out. My mind screamed at me to leave, but my curiosity, that old poisonous instinct, held me there. I picked up the key again, its cold metal burning my skin. On its handle were faint markings, like initials worn away by time. I squinted in the dim light. DC, my initials. That realization stopped my heart. I stared at it, shaking my head. No, I muttered. That's not possible. But it was. I'd seen my own name on a grave outside. Now it was carved into a key hidden under the floor. A whisper cut through the silence, so close it felt like it brushed my ear. "Daniel." I jerked my head up, swinging the flashlight wildly. The beam cut across the walls, the shattered jars, the crooked shelves, and then landed on a photo again. The caretaker, Samuel Ward. Only this time, it wasn't the same photograph. He wasn't alone in it anymore. There were 2 figures now, Samuel and a younger man standing beside him, smiling faintly. The face was unmistakable. It was mine. The light flickered. I stumbled backward, hitting the table. The picture fell to the floor, the glass shattering across the boards. Beneath the broken frame was something I hadn't noticed before. Another piece of paper, folded and yellowed with age. My hands shook as I picked it up. The handwriting was different this time, less shaky, more deliberate. If you're reading this, you came back. You always do. You won't remember what you buried, but it remembers you. Don't open the last grave. I dropped the paper, my breath coming in shallow bursts. The words burned into my mind. You always do. The knocking started again, louder this time, more frantic. Dust rained from the ceiling. I backed away from the floor, but the ground split with a loud crack. A section of the boards gave way, collapsing inward. The hole beneath was deep, too deep, a shaft of pure black that seemed to pull light into it. The glow was gone now, but something moved inside the darkness, shifting against the dirt. A whisper rose from below, soft but unmistakable. "Help me." I froze. It wasn't the same voice as before. This one was human, weak, pleading. "Please." It said again, ragged and desperate. "Please help me." I crouched near the edge, peering into the hole. My flashlight beam disappeared into black, swallowed whole. The voice came again, trembling with fear. "I'm trapped. I can't breathe." My rational mind told me it was impossible. No one could be down there, not after all these years. But the voice, it sounded so real, so alive. I dropped the recorder into my pocket and reached for the shovel leaning against the wall. I dug the blade into the edges of the hole, widening it, dirt spilling over my boots. The air that rose from below was cold and damp. "Hold on," I called down. "I'm coming." "Don't," said another voice, deeper, colder, coming from behind me. I froze, the shovel halfway through the next stroke. Slowly I turned. The man in the black hat was standing in the corner again, his outline faint in the flickering lantern light. His head was tilted, his hollow eyes locked on me. "Don't dig," he said softly. "Not again." I swallowed hard, gripping the shovel like a weapon. "Who's down there?" He stepped closer, and the shadows clung to him like smoke. "You are." I took a step back, shaking my head. "You're not making sense." He pointed to the hole. "You buried yourself, Daniel. The last time you came, you thought it would end it. But the ground doesn't forget. It never forgets." The voice from below cried out again, louder now, panicked. "Please, he's lying. Help me." My chest ached, my thoughts spinning. Two voices, one pleading, one warning. Both certain, both familiar. I didn't know who to trust. The man in the hat watched me silently, his expression unreadable. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears. Then, faintly, beneath the panic and the noise, I heard something else, my own voice, echoing from the hole. "Please, Daniel," it said, "don't let him bury us again." The shovel fell from my hands. I staggered backward until my spine hit the wall. My knees gave out. "No!" I whispered. "This isn't real." The man in the hat crouched beside the hole, his voice calm now. "It's realer than anything you've ever known. You dug this grave for yourself. You've done it countless times. You'll do it again. That's the curse of the hollow. It remembers the one who disturbed it." I shook my head violently, clutching my temples. "Why? Why me?" He looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw something almost human in his eyes. "Pity?" "Because you opened the first grave," he said. "Because you woke what sleeps beneath." The hole yawned wider, the soil crumbling around its edges. I crawled backward as the voice below screamed, not in fear, but in rage. A gust of cold air burst from the pit, carrying with it the sound of countless whispers. They filled the shack, climbing the walls, circling me like a storm. I covered my ears, but the voices were inside my head now, clawing at my thoughts. "Finish what you started. Dig. Set us free. Bury him." I screamed, shoving my hands against the ground to push myself up. My fingers brushed something metal. The key, the one with my initials. The man in the hat straightened, his gaze following mine. "That key doesn't open a door," he said quietly. "It locks one." The floor beneath him cracked again, the boards buckling under an unseen weight. He looked down, then back at me. "You have to choose, Daniel. Lock it or join it." The hole widened with a deafening crack. The lantern shattered, plunging the shack into darkness. I could feel the air rushing past me, pulled downward by whatever waited below. The key glowed faintly in my hand. I didn't think. I just threw it into the hole. The instant it vanished, the wind stopped. The earth sealed itself shut with a groan. The voices cut off, replaced by an awful, ringing silence. When I looked up again, the man in the hat was gone. The shack was still, but carved into the dirt where the hole had been were words, written in uneven letters. "The last grave isn't the end. It's the beginning." And from somewhere deep below, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of someone laughing. The laughter that rose from beneath the floorboards wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was soft, distant, but soaked in something ancient and cruel, an echo of madness buried too deep to fade. It rolled through the air like the faint hum of insects in summer, constant and endless. I stood motionless, the broken lantern shards glinting faintly in the moonlight, leaking through the cracks of the shack. My pulse pounded so violently I thought I could hear the blood rushing through my ears, drowning out everything else. The key was gone. The hole was gone. The shack was silent again. But silence, I realized, was never safety here. It was just a breath before the scream. I turned slowly toward the door. It hung slightly open now, swaying just enough to whisper against the frame. The fog outside glowed faintly silver beneath the moon, and I could see the outline of the cemetery stretching beyond. The crooked tombstones, the endless rows of shadows, the faint shimmer of frost on the grass. I should have left. I should have run. But the words carved into the earth echoed through my mind like a wound that refused to close. The last grave isn't the end. It's the beginning. My hands shook as I reached for the recorder in my pocket. It was still on. The red light blinked faintly, mocking me. I pressed play, half expecting static. Instead, I heard my own voice, a voice I didn't remember recording. "This is Daniel Cross," it said calmly. "Entry number 27. I've sealed the grave again, but he's still here. He never leaves. I think I know what he wants." The voice paused and whispered, almost too softly to hear. "He wants me to remember." I shut it off immediately, my breath catching in my throat. 27 entries? I'd only made 2. What the hell was happening? I shoved the recorder back into my pocket, my fingers trembling against the cold plastic. My instinct screamed for me to leave, to drive back to civilization, to lock every door and forget Raven Hollow ever existed. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, was something else, curiosity or maybe obsession. The graveyard wasn't done with me, and I wasn't done with it. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and earth. As I stepped into the open air, the fog parted just enough for me to see the edge of the graveyard again. It wasn't the same as before. The rows of graves had shifted, almost as if the ground had rearranged itself while I was inside. Some stones had moved closer together, others farther apart. And in the center of the cemetery, illuminated by a thin shaft of moonlight, stood the man in the black hat. He wasn't looking at me this time. He was facing one of the graves, his head bowed slightly, as though in prayer. I called out to him, but he didn't move. My voice cracked against the cold air. "Who are you?" I shouted. "What do you want from me?" He turned slowly, the brim of his hat catching the moonlight. For a heartbeat, I saw his face clearly. The hollow eyes, the skin stretched too tightly across his bones, the faint smile that wasn't kindness but understanding. "You should know by now," he said softly. "You're the one who made me." I froze. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, his boots making no sound on the wet earth. "Every grave here has your name on it. Every soul that sleeps here remembers you. You built this place, Daniel. You filled it." My stomach turned. "That's impossible." "Is it?" He tilted his head, his voice dropping lower. "Think, boy. Why do you think you came here? You didn't follow a story. You followed yourself." I shook my head violently. "No, I'm a journalist. I got a call, a voicemail. Someone asked me to come." He smiled faintly. "You did." Something cold crawled down my spine. "You're saying you sent the message?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and gestured toward the grave he'd been standing over. "You buried him here once," he said. "Right where you're standing now." I hesitated, then stepped closer. The gravestone was small, simple, covered in moss. I knelt and brushed it clean, my fingers numb against the damp stone. The name carved into it was almost worn away by time, but when the last of the moss came free, my breath caught in my throat. Samuel Ward, the caretaker. The date of death was 1894, but beneath it, carved faintly in newer letters, was another line. Daniel Cross, 2023. I stumbled backward, my knees giving out. "No!" I whispered. "That's not possible." He watched me silently, his face unreadable. "You think death is simple here?" he asked. "You think time runs straight and hollow? It loops, boy. It eats its own tail. You and I, we've done this before. You dig. I warn. You bury. You forget. Then it all starts again." I felt sick. My hands clawed at the dirt as if I could hold on to something real. "You're lying." He crouched beside me, and for a moment, I could see the faint pulse of something beneath his skin, something alive. "You can lie to yourself, Daniel, but not to the earth." He placed one pale hand on the gravestone. "This is where you ended it last time. You locked it away, and then you ran. But you always come back. You can't stay away from what you made. What did I make? I demanded. He smiled again, and this time it was different, almost mournful. You built a grave that doesn't end. A sudden crack of thunder split the air. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder, soaking the ground. The fog swirled violently, wrapping around us both. The man stood, his coat whipping in the wind. He's waking again, he said. You've already opened the door. Who? I shouted over the storm. Who's waking? He looked at me, his expression shifting, the faint glimmer of something human flickering in his eyes. You, he said, the part of you that never died. The rain turned to a downpour, hammering the gravestones. I tried to see through the fog, but the man in the hat had vanished again, leaving only the sound of his voice carried on the wind. You can't bury what you are, Daniel. You can only feed it. Lightning flashed, blinding white against the night sky, and in that instant, every grave around me shifted. The soil swelled and split, and pale hands began to claw their way through the earth. Dozens of them, hundreds. The dead were rising, their mouths open but silent, their eyes blind and unseeing. The rain washed over their faces, carving lines through the dirt and rot. I backed away, tripping over roots and stones. The graves kept opening, the sound of wet soil tearing filling the air. My foot caught on something, cold and metallic, the shovel, the same one from the shack. I grabbed it and swung wildly at the nearest hand, the blade slicing through air. But no matter how many I struck, more emerged. The fog thickened, coiling around my ankles, my knees, my chest, pulling me downward. I fought against it, gasping for air. The whispering began again, louder now, the voices of 1,000 throats speaking as one. You opened the last grave. I didn't. I screamed. I didn't. The rain drowned my voice. The whispering rose higher, filling my ears until it was all I could hear. My vision blurred, the world collapsing into gray. And then, suddenly everything stopped. The rain was gone. The fog was gone. The graveyard was empty. I was standing alone in a vast field beneath a blood-red sky. The graves had vanished. The earth was smooth and black, stretching endlessly in every direction. The only thing that remained was a single figure in the distance, standing perfectly still. It was me, my reflection, my double. He smiled a hollow, lifeless smile and raised a hand. In it, he held the brass key. Welcome back, he said. For a long, breathless moment, I could only stare at him. At me, the other Daniel stood motionless across the barren field, his clothes torn, his skin pale as if drained of blood. The world around us was stripped of sound and color. Even the air felt hollow, like it had forgotten how to move. The horizon was smeared in endless red. The sky cracked with veins of black cloud. There were no trees, no graves, no fog, just this impossible emptiness stretching forever between us. My reflection tilted his head, and that slight, unnatural movement sent a jolt of nausea through me. "Where are you?" I managed to whisper. My voice was thin, barely audible in the dead stillness. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that wasn't meant for comfort. "You already know," he said. His voice was mine, familiar but distant, as if recorded and played back through static. "You've always known." I took a cautious step forward. The ground felt soft beneath my boots, pliant, like walking over damp flesh instead of soil. Each step left a faint impression that pulsed once before disappearing. "This isn't real," I muttered, shaking my head. "It's a dream or a hallucination." "Maybe," he said, "but you've been dreaming a long time, Daniel, and some dreams don't let you wake up." My chest tightened. "What do you want from me?" He turned the key in his hand slowly, letting it catch the dim red light. "I want what you took, what you locked away, the part of me that remembers." I swallowed hard. "The grave," I said. "You mean what's buried?" He nodded once, almost approvingly. "Yes, but you didn't bury me to forget. You buried me to survive." My breath came faster. "You're not making sense." He laughed quietly. "Aren't I?" He began walking toward me, the ground trembling faintly beneath his feet. "Think, Daniel. You came here to tell a story. But you weren't the first Daniel to do that. Every time you come back, you say the same things, ask the same questions, pretend you don't remember. You dig, you listen, you scream, and then you bury it all again. You made this place your graveyard of truths. I backed away, my pulse hammering. No, I don't believe you. His expression didn't change. You don't have to. The hollow believes enough for both of us. When he stopped a few feet away, I could finally see his eyes clearly. They were black, bottomless, endless, and somehow alive. I felt my knees weaken. My head swam, dizzy with the sudden rush of memories claw at the edges of my consciousness. Flashes of earth, of rain, of digging until my hands bled. The sound of my own voice crying into the soil, "I'm sorry." Then a face, his face, emerging from the dirt. "You buried me," he said softly, "but I never died." I turned and ran. The field stretched endlessly in every direction, but I ran anyway, desperate to find anything that wasn't him. The ground shifted beneath me with every step, rippling like waves. My lungs burned, and behind me, I could hear him laughing again, that same low, knowing sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You can't outrun what you are," he called. I tripped and fell, slamming hard onto the soft earth. The soil beneath my hands was warm. When I looked down, I realized it wasn't soil at all, it was skin. A thin layer stretched across whatever this place was, pulsing faintly, alive. I scrambled to my feet, horror surging through me. When I looked up again, the graves were back. Hundreds of them, rising from the ground as if being exhaled by the land itself. Each one was marked with the same name, Daniel Cross. The field that had been empty moments ago was now crowded with headstones, all identical, stretching into the horizon. The air grew colder, heavier. The red light dimmed to gray. I staggered between the graves, my breathing ragged. The silence pressed down on me until I couldn't stand it anymore. "What do you want me to do?" I shouted into the endless graveyard. From somewhere close, his voice answered, calm and patient. "Finish it." I spun around. He was standing beside one of the graves, the key still dangling from his fingers. "End what you started," he said, "or it will never stop." I stared at the grave he was standing over. It was newer than the others, the dirt still damp, the lettering fresh and sharp. Daniel Cross, 2023. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. He tossed the key toward me. It landed at my feet with a dull thud. "You locked the truth away," he said. "Now unlock it." I bent to pick it up, my fingers trembling. The metal was cold, heavier than it should have been. "And if I do, then you'll see what really sleeps beneath." The graves around us began to hum. The sound was low at first, like the murmur of bees inside a hive, but it grew louder, rising into a chorus of whispers. I turned in circles, heart racing. The names on the gravestones began to blur, the letters twisting, rearranging themselves. Soon, every stone bore a different word. Guilt, fear, lies, blood. My double smiled faintly. "They're yours. Every grave a memory you tried to kill, every lie you buried." The hum turned into a roar, the ground vibrating beneath my feet. Cracks tore through the soil, black mist spilling out. I dropped the key, but it didn't fall. It hung in the air before me, suspended, spinning slowly. The sound of wind filled the world, though there was no wind here. Then, one by one, the graves began to open. Hands clawed their way up from the dirt. My hands, hundreds of them, reaching, grasping. Faces followed, all of them mine, each twisted in agony, mouths open in silent screams. I stumbled back, choking on the stench of decay. The air was thick, suffocating. My reflection stepped closer, his voice calm amid the chaos. "You built this place to hide from yourself. You buried everything you couldn't face. But the ground remembers. The ground always remembers." The sky cracked open, a sound like the world splitting apart. Black rain began to fall, thick, oily drops that hissed as they hit the earth. The other me lifted his face to it, letting it run down his pale skin like ink. "The curse isn't the hollow," he said. "It's you." My vision blurred. I could barely breathe. I clutched my chest, sinking to my knees. "Make it stop?" I gasped. He crouched in front of me, those bottomless eyes inches from mine. "There's only one way to stop it," he whispered. "You have to bury me again." Lightning split the red sky. The roar of the graves rose to a scream. My ears rang, my body shaking as I grabbed the key from the air. It pulsed faintly, as if it were alive. My reflection smiled one last time. "You know where," he said. And then he stepped backward into the nearest grave and vanished. The moment he disappeared, the world shattered like glass. The sound was deafening. A crack, a rush of air, a flash of white light. And suddenly I was back in the real graveyard, rain pouring down, mud clinging to my hands. The shovel lay beside me, its handle splintered. The storm raged overhead. The graves had returned to their proper places. But one was open, mine. The headstone gleamed in the lightning. The soil churned at my feet, as if something beneath it were breathing. The key in my hand throbbed with heat. I stared down into the dark pit, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw movement. Something shifting in the black, waiting. I should have run. I should have left the key, left this cursed place behind. But instead, I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and climbed into my own grave. The rain fell harder, filling the hole with water. I knelt in the mud, pressing the key into the earth. "I'd bury you," I whispered. "I bury myself." The ground trembled once, then stilled. The key sank from sight. I waited for the silence to settle. But from the darkness beneath me came a final whisper, soft, almost tender. "You can't bury a shadow, Daniel. It follows wherever you go." The earth gave way beneath me, and I fell. Falling felt like drowning inside a scream that had no end. There was no air, no ground, no sky, just a sensation of being swallowed by something vast and alive. The soil pressed against my skin, thick and wet, filling my mouth and ears. I couldn't breathe. I tried to claw my way upward, but every movement only dragged me deeper, the mud pulling me down like hands. The more I fought, the stronger the pull became, until I could no longer tell where my body ended and the earth began. My lungs burned. My mind began to fade. And then, just as consciousness began to slip away, I landed. The impact was soft, almost gentle, like falling onto damp moss. I gasped and coughed up mud, my chest heaving. I blinked through the darkness, wiping dirt from my eyes. The air here was thick and warm, smelling of rot and rain-soaked stone. When I pushed myself to my feet, I realized I was no longer in the graveyard, or at least not the one above. This place was a reflection of it, a hollow beneath the hollow. A cavernous expanse stretched out before me, lined with roots that hung from the ceiling like veins. The glow was faint, emanating from cracks in the walls where some strange fungus pulsed like a heartbeat. In the distance, I could hear the sound of dripping water, echoing endlessly. The soil beneath my boots squelched with each step. I called out, my voice small against the immensity of this place. "Hello? Is anyone here?" The echo came back distorted, warped, as if something repeated the word here over and over in 100 voices. I spun in circles, flashlight trembling in my hand. But there was nothing, just a vast, suffocating emptiness. And yet, I wasn't alone. I could feel eyes on me, watching from beyond the dark. I began walking, though I didn't know where to go. The walls seemed to breathe as I passed, the faint pulsation of the glowing veins matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. Every few feet, I saw strange shapes protruding from the earth, objects half buried. Old lanterns, rusted shovels, torn scraps of clothing. Then bones, human bones, jutting out of the walls like the cavern had digested them. Skulls with cracked jaws, spines tangled in roots. My hand brushed against one of them, and I felt warmth. Flesh. The skull's empty eye sockets seemed to widen, as if it had come alive at my touch. I stumbled back, my light flickering. Then I heard it, the whisper. "Daniel." It came from the darkness ahead. Soft. Familiar. I froze. It wasn't the man in the hat this time. It was another voice, one I hadn't heard in years. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. "Who's there?" "Daniel." It said again, clearer now. "You shouldn't have come back." The beam of my flashlight caught a figure stepping from the shadows. A woman, pale and dirt-streaked, her clothes tattered. Her hair hung in tangled strands over her shoulders. I felt my stomach drop. I knew her. It was Lauren, my producer. But that was impossible. She wasn't here. She'd begged me not to come to Raven Hollow. She'd never left the city. And yet here she was, standing barefoot in the mud, her eyes wide and hollow, her lips trembling as she looked at me. "Lauren?" My voice cracked. How did you get here?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me, tears glistening on her cheeks. "You left me," she whispered. I shook my head violently. No, that's not true. You buried me," she said, her voice low, shaking. "Right here, in the hollow." Before I could speak again, she moved closer. Her face flickered, her features warping between her own and something else. Something bloated and pale, with blackened veins crawling beneath translucent skin. The light flickered across her eyes, which were no longer human, but pits of black that seemed to swallow light. "You left me to die, Daniel," she hissed, just like the others. I stumbled backward, the beam trembling wildly as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "No, you're not real." She smiled faintly. "Neither are you." Then her jaw cracked open wider than it should have, an awful tearing sound filling the air as black water poured from her mouth. I screamed, dropping the flashlight. The light rolled across the ground, casting spinning shadows as she lunged forward, her hands clawing at the air. I bolted into the dark. My boots splashed through mud, the sound of her laughter echoing behind me. Low, gurgling, almost joyous. The tunnel twisted endlessly, splitting into passageways that led in every direction. I didn't care which one I chose. I just ran, my lungs burning. Finally, I burst into a wide chamber. The air here was even thicker, heavy with decay. My light flickered weakly across the walls, revealing hundreds of carvings, names etched into the stone. I moved closer, tracing them with shaking fingers. Each one was familiar. Lauren Hughes, Wall Hargreaves, Samuel Ward, Daniel Cross. My own name appeared over and over again, each inscription layered atop the last, some ancient, others new. The wall was alive with them, pulsing faintly like veins beneath skin. Something moved behind me. I turned slowly. The man in the black hat stood in the center of the chamber, his coat dripping with black water, his eyes glimmering faintly in the dark. His voice was calm, almost weary. "You keep running," he said. "You keep pretending you're different from the rest." My voice came out as a whisper. "What are you?" He took a step closer, and the mud beneath his boots hissed like boiling tar. "The hollow," he said simply. "The keeper, the hunger, the thing you try to feed and bury." I felt my throat tighten. "Feed?" He nodded. "Every time you come back, you bring something with you. Every person you talk to, every voice that listens, every soul that hears your story, they become part of it, part of me, part of you." He smiled, a crack in his face that wasn't human. "That's why you record, isn't it? To spread the grave a little farther?" I staggered back. "You're lying." "Am I?" He raised a skeletal hand and pointed at my pocket. "Play it." The recorder. My trembling hand fished it out, my thumb brushing against the button. I didn't want to press it, but my fingers moved on their own. The red light blinked. At first, I heard only static. Then my voice, began speaking. "This is Daniel Cross, and if you're listening, it's already too late." The blood drained from my face. The recording continued. "You'll think this is a story. You'll think it's entertainment. But every word brings you closer. Every listen feeds him. Every whisper keeps him alive." I dropped the recorder, my stomach twisting in horror. It hit the mud and continued to play, my voice now whispering softly, "Welcome to Raven Hollow." The man in the hat knelt beside the recorder, the shadows deepening around him. "You built this, Daniel," he said. "Every word you spoke, every story you told. It was never yours. You've been my mouth all along." He stood, towering over me now. "You opened a grave not by digging, but by remembering. You spoke it into being. The hollow doesn't need shovels anymore. It just needs stories. The walls began to move, the carved names writhing like living things. The sound of hundreds of whispers filled the chamber again, merging into a single unbearable roar. He reached out a pale hand. "Come now," he said softly. "You've told their story. Now let them tell yours." Before I could move, the ground beneath me cracked open, black water surging upward, dragging me under. I screamed, but the sound was devoured instantly. The last thing I saw before the darkness swallowed me was a man in the black hat standing perfectly still, his smile widening as the recorder's red light blinked one last time. Then everything went silent, and in that silence, I heard my own voice again, calm, cold, and certain. "This is Daniel Cross. Welcome back to Beneath the Surface." There was no pain when the darkness took me, only a vast, unending stillness. It was like falling asleep in a room where even time had stopped. The cold sank into my bones, yet my body didn't shiver. My lungs no longer ached for air. I didn't know if I was buried, floating, or simply erased. The silence was so deep it had weight. And beneath that silence, just faintly, came the softest sound, the rhythmic pulse of the earth, steady and patient. It wasn't a heartbeat. It was older than that. Then, from far away, I heard breathing. Not mine. Slow and deliberate. I tried to move, but my limbs felt buried beneath tons of soil. My fingers brushed against something rough, wooden perhaps, and I realized I was inside a coffin. The thought should have filled me with terror. But there was a strange calm to it. My mind whispered that this was inevitable, that this was where I had always been headed. A voice drifted through the dark, faint at first, but growing clearer with each syllable. "You never stopped talking, Daniel. You thought you could tell stories about the dead without feeding them. You thought their silence made you safe." I knew that voice. The man in the black hat. I wanted to speak, to tell him he was wrong, but no sound left my mouth, only a faint rasp. The air around me trembled, as if something vast was shifting just beyond the coffin walls. Then came another voice, closer this time, my own. "This is Daniel Cross, and I'm still here." I froze. It wasn't a recording. It was me. But not me as I was now. This was my voice from before, alive, certain, confident. The voice of the man who thought every mystery had an answer if you just looked long enough. Then I heard scratching above me, the dull scrape of nails on wood. Something was digging. Dirt fell in small, muffled clumps, landing on the coffin lid. The sound grew louder, more frantic. I tried to call out, but all I could manage was a whisper. The scratches stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, with a groan of wood and soil, the lid above me splintered open. Light stabbed into the darkness, blinding me. I squinted, gasping as the air rushed in, heavy with the scent of rain and rot. A silhouette stood above the grave, bent, familiar. The black hat glistened with mud. He smiled down at me. Back again. I coughed, dirt spilling from my mouth as I tried to sit up. My body felt weightless, hollow. What do you want from me?" He crouched by the edge of the grave, resting his pale hands on the rim. "I told you. I want what's mine." "You said that before." I rasped. "What does that even mean?" He tilted his head, studying me with those dark, endless eyes. "You took my voice, Daniel. You made it your own. You called it storytelling. You called it journalism. But all you were doing was digging for things better left buried." I shook my head weakly. "No, I was trying to understand." "Understanding is just another kind of hunger," he said. "You don't want to understand, you want to possess. You want every ghost to speak, every silence to break. You're no different from me." He reached down and touched my face. His fingers were cold and dry as ash. We're the same story told in different words. I shoved his hand away, anger cutting through my fear. "If we're the same, then why are you still here?" He smiled faintly. "Because someone has to keep telling it." Before I could reply, the world around us shifted. The graveyard stretched outward, growing impossibly large, the horizon bending like warped glass. Graves open and closed, their stones rearranging themselves as the fog poured back in, thick and white. The trees bent toward us like eavesdroppers, their bare branches twitching. The man rose, towering over me now, his presence filling the space like a storm. You think you can stop this by running, by forgetting, by recording your little stories and moving on to the next one, he said. But you are the grave now, Daniel. The stories live in you. He stepped closer to the edge of the pit. The ground trembled with each step. Every listener feeds it. Every whisper brings it back. Every time your voice plays in someone's ears, I wake up again. I felt the cold spread through me as the truth sank in. He wasn't just speaking to me. He was speaking through me. You built the hollow with words, he said, his voice now echoing through the fog, through the ground, through the air. You gave it life every time you spoke. That's the curse of the storyteller. You think you're digging up the dead, but it's the dead who are digging through you. The sky split with thunder. The fog ignited with flashes of white light. I could see shapes moving within it. Faces, bodies, hundreds of them crawling just beneath the surface, pressing their hands against a veil between us. Their mouths moved soundlessly, mouthing the same word over and over. Remember, the man in the black had turned his gaze on me again. You wanted the truth. So here it is. You were never the one telling their stories, Daniel. They've been telling yours. The ground gave a violent shudder, and the coffin cracked apart. I fell forward into the mud, gasping, my hands sinking into the soil. When I looked up, the man was gone. The fog swallowed him, leaving only the faint echo of his words. And then I saw it, the recorder. It lay in the mud a few feet away, still blinking red. The light was faint, but steady. I crawled toward it, my fingers shaking as I reached for it. The moment I touched it, the static flared. Then my own voice spoke. This is Daniel Cross. If you're hearing this, I'm already buried. My throat went dry. The recording continued, my voice lower now, almost pleading. The hollow feeds on sound, on stories. Every listener brings it closer. Don't listen. Don't. The recording cut off with a burst of static. I stared at the device, my heart hammering. Then, faintly, I heard something new, not through the recorder, but around me, whispering. Dozens of voices rising and falling in a single breath. The sound came from every direction, from the soil, the air, the fog itself. They were whispering my name. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling through the graveyard. The fog parted in brief flashes, revealing rows of headstones, each one etched with my name and the same inscription beneath it. He never stopped digging. The earth beneath me rippled, pulsing like the slow beat of a monstrous heart. I ran. I didn't care where. My flashlight beam bounced wildly across the graves, the light barely cutting through the mist. I could still hear the whispers behind me. No, not behind. Inside. They were inside my head now, murmuring in rhythm with my heartbeat. Tell it, they said. Tell it again. The ground erupted ahead of me, throwing me backward. I landed hard. The wind knocked from my chest. When I looked up, there was the open grave, the same one, my name carved deeper now, the letters wet with blood, and standing beside it, his face lost in shadow, was a man in the black hat. He extended his hand. You can end it, he said softly, or you can speak it again. The fog thickened, rising like a tide. I could feel the soil shifting beneath me, the grave waiting. My fingers hovered over the recorder's stop button. The whispers grew louder, 1,000 voices in unison. Tell it again, Daniel. The man's hand reached toward me. The air grew heavy, thick with static. I closed my eyes. A single breath, a single choice. Click, silence. The fog lifted. The graves vanished. The world was still again. For the first time, the earth didn't breathe. But somewhere far away, in a quiet bedroom, a listener pressed play on a new episode of Beneath the Surface. The voice that came through the speakers was calm, familiar, and cold. This is Daniel Cross. It said, Welcome to Raven Hollow.